Ever imagine getting like a personal deep dive into someone else's life, like almost like a cheat sheet on their biggest lessons? Well, that's kind of what we're doing today, right? We're looking at 50 Cent's autobiography, From Pieces to Weight. It's raw, it's real, and it's definitely like way more than just your typical rags to riches story. You know what I mean?
Exactly. This book is, it's really interesting. It kind of peels back all these layers on how, like a really tough environment can shape a person, shape the choices you make when you're like under so much pressure, and what success really costs, especially when it comes from, where 50 Cent came from.
Let's jump right into 50 Cent's world. Okay, we're talking about Southside Queens back in the 80s. It definitely wasn't a place where kids were like dreaming of being a lawyer or a doctor.
Yeah. I mean, the role models that 50 Cent had growing up were hustlers. It just goes to show you how easily a dangerous lifestyle can become like the norm, especially when there aren't a lot of positive alternatives around you,
And this wasn't just, theoretical for him. We're talking about a kid who started dealing crack cocaine at 11 years old. I mean, 11. It's shocking, right? But at the same time, you can't deny that there's this like twisted business sense there, even at that young age.
Oh, absolutely. He had no choice but to learn, like master the rules of the street, supply and demand, keeping your customers loyal, building a reputation that could like literally keep you alive. These were his first business lessons, for better or worse.
He talks about this one time, his cousin Brian had this room, right, stacked with shoeboxes. It was like his own little sneaker empire. But Brian was so stingy, he wouldn't even like help out his own family.
Yeah, it shows how family loyalty can get so complicated when you're talking about money and survival, And it's such a contrast to another person in 50 Cent's life, Sincere.
Oh, right, Sincere. He was the one who gave 50 Cent his first taste of the drug game. Those Fat Alberts, they called them. Crazy to think about a kid that young, running those errands. But Sincere must have seen something in him, right?
Oh, yeah. Sincere. He was strategic, too. He connected 50 Cent with Carlos, this like higher level supplier who operated more like a legitimate businessman.
I love that part in the book where they're cruising around in Carlos's Ferrari, right? And Carlos is giving 50 Cent like a whole lecture on market saturation. This kid, barely a teenager, getting a crash course in economics from a high-rolling drug lord.
It really highlights something that you see over and over again in the book. Even in that world, 50 Cent, he was always looking to learn, to find an edge. He may not have had like traditional mentors, but he was absorbing information, wherever he could find it.
But of course, it wasn't all, a harmless game. Remember that story about Chance, who tried to set 50 Cent up with a bad drug deal?
Oh, right. The one where Chance convinces him to like front some drugs, saying that his supplier had shorted him. Then all of a sudden, people are accusing 50 Cent of selling light bags. Then he realizes he's been played,
Talk about a close call, right? I mean, it really shows you just how much danger he was in and how little trust he could afford to have, even with people he thought he could rely on.
Yeah, and this whole theme of betrayal, it even extends to his own family. The way he describes catching his Uncle Star stealing from his stash. Not just like once, but over and over again, Taking just a tiny bit from each bag so it wasn't obvious.
He describes this rage, this like burning rage building up inside of him, almost beating his uncle to death with a wooden fork. That feeling of betrayal, from someone who was supposed to have his back, that's got to leave a mark.
And that leads to, another turning point. 50 Cent runs away from home, absolutely terrified of what might happen if he stays.
So now he's out on his own, navigating this like crazy, dangerous world. He ends up running into Junior's crew, known for being, ruthless and violent. I got chills when he said, when a stranger pulls out a gun on someone, it's assumed that the guy with the gun is going to shoot. Chilling.
It's just this stark reminder of how present the threat of violence was in his life. It was constant. Every interaction, it was like life or death.
But even with all that going on, he finds these moments of like, humor. Remember that story about his grandfather's friend who burned his arms on dry ice during a drunken bet?
Oh, yeah. It just shows how chaotic and unpredictable his life really was. I mean, one minute it's life or death, and the next it's this like bizarre, darkly comedic moment. And all of this before he even reaches high school.
You start to see, how all this shaped him. That mix of street smarts and resilience, and this constant awareness that danger could be lurking anywhere. But music music became his way out, like his new hustle,
Yeah.
And to think, he signed a publishing deal while he was still in a court-ordered rehab program.
Classic 50 Cent, right?
Yeah.
Always working an angle. It shows how that entrepreneurial drive was always there, but now it had a legitimate outlet. And he even starts a relationship with Tanisha, the mother of his first son, during this time.
Trying to balance a new relationship, his music ambitions, and the pull of the streets, it's got to be a lot of pressure.
And then comes the turning point that could have ended it all, the shooting.
9 times. 9 times. To be shot that many times and survive? Do you think that, I don't know, do you think that fueled his drive to succeed? Or maybe made him even more cautious,
That's hard to say, but it definitely solidified this belief he had that he had a purpose, that he was meant for something bigger. I mean, he even refused painkillers during his recovery. That's a whole other level of mental toughness,
That resilience, it's like a constant thread throughout his story. Get rich or die trying. It wasn't just an album title, it was his, life motto. And he did get rich, building a business empire that goes way beyond music.
But his past, it never really lets go. He talks about constantly battling that street mentality, struggling to trust people, always feeling like someone's watching him, even as he's, achieving mainstream success.
There's this line that really stuck with me. He says, "Good times can mess with you just as much as bad times can." And this wonder, if success, especially when it comes from such a difficult place, can ever truly bring peace.
It's a question we'll keep unpacking as we delve deeper into 50 Cent's journey. There's so much more to uncover, so let's keep diving.
Yeah, it's wild to think about how those early experiences in Southside Queens really shaped 50 Cent's whole worldview. Like those stories about his cousin Brian and Uncle Star. They really show how betrayal can come from the people who are supposed to be closest to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone growing up in that environment where trust is already so hard to come by, that kind of betrayal, I mean, it has to be incredibly damaging.
It's like he learned super early on that he couldn't rely on anyone but himself, and that self-reliance becomes this huge driving force for him throughout his whole life.
Exactly. We see it in how he approaches the drug game. Always looking for an advantage, trying to learn from the more experienced guys like Carlos, and we see it again when he starts pursuing music, refusing to let anything stand in his way.
It's interesting to think about those scenes where he's getting business advice from a high-rolling drug lord while they're cruising around in a Ferrari. It's like a twisted version of mentorship,
Yeah.
But it just shows how willing he was to learn from anyone, regardless of their background.
Yeah, it's almost like he can separate the person from the knowledge. You know what I mean? He sees that even in a criminal world, there are valuable lessons to be learned, strategies to be adopted, and that ability to adapt and learn from any situation, it becomes one of his greatest strengths.
But it's not just about, absorbing information. It's about applying it, right? Taking action, making things happen. Remember that story about him buying the Toyota Land Cruiser from the dealership?
Oh yeah, classic 50 Cent move. He shows up looking like, anything but a high roller. Scruffy clothes, backpack, but he's carrying this duffel bag stuffed with cash. He purposely downplays his wealth, using it as a tactical advantage.
It's like he's playing a character, right?
Yeah.
A role that lets him navigate all these different worlds and achieve his goals. But sometimes that street persona, gets him into trouble. With that gambling incident with Antoine. Wins all of Antoine's money, then just rubs salt in the wound by paying off his debts right in front of him.
Total power move, but it also shows how those old habits, they die hard. He's still operating with that street code where respect and reputation, they're everything. But those same rules, they don't always apply in the legitimate world, and that can lead to conflict and misunderstandings.
Exactly. And then there's his relationship with Tanisha. You can see how much he cares about her and their son. But there's this underlying tension, this inability to fully let go of his past.
He struggles to trust her, even accusing her of not wanting to spend time with their son. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see how his past trauma is still, influencing his present relationships.
It's like he's constantly on guard, expecting betrayal around every corner.
Yeah.
And that fear, that feeling of always having to look over your shoulder, I mean, that's got to take a toll.
Absolutely. And it highlights one of the major themes of this book, the hidden costs of success. Even as 50 Cent achieves, fame and fortune, he's still haunted by these demons from his past.
And it makes you wonder, what does it say about our society when someone who has achieved so much, someone with so much potential is still trapped in this cycle of fear and violence,
It's a really complex question, and there are no easy answers. But I think 50 Cent's story makes us confront some uncomfortable truths about poverty, opportunity, and the impact of trauma. It's not just about individual choices, it's about systemic issues that still plague our communities.
And it's a story that's not over yet.
All right.
As we move into the final part of our deep dives, we'll explore how 50 Cent navigates these challenges of fame and fortune, while trying to reconcile his past with his present. We've seen how 50 Cent's early life really shaped him, his hustle, his drive, his whole worldview. But in this final part of our deep dive, I'm really curious about how those early experiences play out when he achieves massive success. Does he ever really escape those shadows?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And I think his book shows that success, it doesn't erase the past, It might change your circumstances, but those scars, the instincts, the deep-seated fears, those things, they stay with you.
He even talks about still having to wear bulletproof vests, and traveling in armored cars even after Get Rich or Die Trying made him a global superstar. It's like reaching the top doesn't actually make you feel safe, especially when you come from a world where, violence is a constant threat.
Yeah, he's achieved the American dream, but he's still living with this crazy level of paranoia, hypervigilance. Makes you think about the psychological toll of that kind of upbringing. It's like this constant pressure cooker of survival.
And it's not just physical safety either. He talks about feeling uncomfortable around law enforcement, even when he's become a legitimate businessman.
Yeah.
That distrust, it runs deep.
You can see how those early run-ins with the police, that feeling of being targeted and judged, it stayed with him, even as he achieved mainstream acceptance. Really speaks to, the complexities of social mobility, how even when you quote unquote make it, certain prejudices and assumptions can still follow you.
And that sense of distrust, it seems like it extends to his personal relationships too, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the tension with Tanisha, how he struggles to trust her, even accuses her of, not wanting to be around their son.
It's a tragic cycle. He's yearning for love and connection, but his past experiences make it so hard for him to let people in, It's like he's just waiting for that betrayal, even from the people who care about him the most.
It reminds me of that scene where he's signing the publishing deal from his hospital bed after being stabbed. Even in a moment of vulnerability and pain, his hustle never stops. It's almost like he's driven by this need to prove something, not just to the world, but maybe even to himself,
Maybe he's trying to outrun those early experiences, build a life so successful that it just overshadows, completely eclipses the darkness of his past. But as we've seen, the past isn't so easily forgotten.
There's this line he writes that really got to me. He says, "The streets are where you get the least love." So heartbreaking, but also incredibly insightful.
It speaks to this idea that even as you achieve success, as you try to distance yourself from that world, there's this underlying sense of loss. You might gain fame and fortune, but you lose something precious along the way. A sense of belonging, of community, of unconditional love.
It makes you wonder, if success, especially when it comes at such a high cost, can never really feel, fulfilling. If those early wounds, those fears and insecurities ever really heal.
It's a question that lingers long after you finish this book. And I think it's a question that we each have to answer for ourselves. What are we willing to sacrifice to achieve our dreams? And what do we gain and lose along the way?
50 Cent story. It's a really powerful reminder that success, it's complicated. It's not just about money and fame. It's about, navigating all the challenges of life, the contradictions, and finding your own definition of what it means to truly thrive.
And it's a story that continues to resonate, His journey from the streets of Southside Queens to global icon, it's just a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, to the power of ambition, and to the impact that our experiences have, both the good and the bad.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive, and I hope our listeners will continue to explore 50 Cent's story and the stories of others who have overcome so much to achieve extraordinary things.
Remember, there's always more to learn, more to discover and more to share. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.